It was a quiet afternoon inside a high-end luxury store in Beverly Hills. Soft music played in the background, glass displays sparkled under warm lights, and well-dressed customers moved slowly from section to section. This was the kind of place where appearances mattered. Expensive suits, designer handbags, and confident smiles were the unspoken dress code. Steven Seagal walked in alone. He wasn't wearing anything flashy. Just a black jacket, loose pants, and dark sunglasses. No assistants. No security. No signs that the man who had just entered was a global action movie icon and martial arts master known for decades of on-screen dominance. A salesman behind the counter glanced up and frowned. Steven calmly browsed, running his fingers over a display, clearly interested but in no rush. Minutes passed. Other customers were greeted warmly, offered drinks, and treated with respect. Steven, however, was completely ignored. Finally, he approached the counter. "Excuse me," Steven said politely. "I'd like to ask about this item." The salesman looked him up and down, then scoffed. "This section isn't for browsing," the salesman replied coldly. "These items are expensive." Steven paused, surprised by the tone. "I understand," he said calmly. "That's why I'm asking." The salesman smirked. "Look, buddy, I don't think this store is for you. You should try somewhere else." A few nearby customers turned their heads. The air shifted slightly. Steven removed his sunglasses, revealing calm, focused eyes. "There's no need to be rude," he said quietly. That's when the salesman snapped. "Rude," he barked. "You walk in here wasting my time, touching merchandise you can't afford, and now you want respect?" Steven took a slow breath. "I'm just asking for basic courtesy." The salesman stepped closer. Too close. "Get out," he said. "Now." Steven didn't move. In a sudden burst of anger, the salesman raised his hand and slapped Steven Seagal across the face. The sound echoed through the store. Everything stopped. Customers gasped. Someone dropped their phone. A woman covered her mouth in shock. No one could believe what they had just seen. A grown man striking another man in public over nothing more than an assumption. Steven Seagal stood completely still. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't clench his fists. He didn't strike back. He slowly turned his head, looked directly at the salesman, and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "You've just made a very serious mistake." And in that moment, everyone in the store realized. Whatever happened next was going to shock them all. For a few long seconds after the slap, no one moved. The luxury store, once filled with soft music and casual conversation, was now completely silent. Every eye was fixed on Steven Seagal and the salesman. The sharp sound of the slap still seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unreal. A woman near the entrance whispered, "Did he really just do that?" Another customer slowly raised his phone, hands shaking slightly, and began recording. The salesman, breathing hard, looked around as if expecting support. Instead, he saw shock, confusion, and quiet disapproval staring back at him. But rather than calming down, his embarrassment turned into arrogance. "What are you looking at?" he snapped at the crowd. "Mind your own business." Steven remained motionless. He gently touched his cheek once, not in pain, but as if acknowledging what had just happened. When he spoke, his voice was low and controlled. "There was no reason for that," he said. The salesman laughed nervously. "Oh yeah, you gonna cry about it? You should have left when I told you to." Steven met his eyes. There was no anger in his expression, only calm awareness. "I came in with respect," Steven replied. "I expect the same in return." That calmness seemed to irritate the salesman even more. "You expect respect," he scoffed. "From me? Look at you. You don't belong here." A man near the watch display shook his head. "That was uncalled for," he muttered. "Stay out of it," the salesman snapped back. "This doesn't concern you." More phones appeared. The situation was no longer private. People sensed something important unfolding, a moment that could turn ugly or legendary at any second. Steven took a small step back, creating space between them. His hands were open, relaxed at his sides. Anyone trained in self-defense would recognize it immediately, a posture of control, not submission. "Let's end this here," Steven said calmly. "No one needs to get hurt." The salesman rolled his eyes. "You threatening me now?" "I'm doing the opposite," Steven answered. Security had not yet arrived. The store manager was nowhere in sight. The salesman clearly felt powerful in that moment, fueled by ego and the belief that the man in front of him was weak. "You touch anything else in this store," the salesman said, pointing a finger inches from Steven's chest, "and I'll have you thrown out." Steven didn't flinch. "You already crossed a line," he said quietly. "You still have a chance to step back." That sentence caused murmurs to ripple through the crowd. "What does that mean?" someone whispered. The salesman smirked again. "You think you're special or something?" Steven's eyes scanned the room briefly, the recording phones, the concerned faces, the tension building with every breath. "I think everyone deserves dignity," he replied. The salesman shook his head in disbelief. "Unbelievable." He took a step closer again, invading Steven's space, trying to provoke a reaction. "Go ahead," he taunted. "Do something." The store felt smaller now, the air tighter. People held their breath, expecting an explosion. Have you ever seen someone disrespected like this in public? Comment below and tell us which country or city you're watching from. Steven Seagal stood there, calm and unshaken, a man surrounded by chaos yet completely in control of himself. And the longer he stayed silent, the more dangerous the situation felt. Because everyone in that store could sense it now. This man wasn't afraid. The silence inside the store felt unbearable now. Steven Seagal stood face to face with the salesman, who was clearly enjoying the attention. Phones were raised everywhere. Some customers had stepped back, creating a loose circle around the two men, as if instinctively giving space for whatever was about to happen next. The salesman broke the silence with a mocking laugh. "You just gonna stand there?" he said loudly. "Or are you finally gonna leave like I told you?" Steven's voice was steady, almost calm to the point of being unsettling. "I'm not here to fight you," he said. "But I won't be bullied either." That only fueled the salesman's ego. "Bullied?" he repeated, scoffing. "You're in my store. I tell you what to do." Steven slowly shook his head. "No," he replied. "You work here. That doesn't give you power over people." A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. The salesman's face tightened. "You think you're some kind of tough guy?" Steven didn't answer right away. He simply adjusted his stance, feet shoulder-width apart, posture relaxed but grounded. To the untrained eye, it looked like nothing. To those who knew anything about martial arts, it was clear. This was a man who knew exactly how to control his body. The salesman pointed toward the entrance. "Last chance. Get out, or I call security." Steven met his gaze. "Call them." The words were calm, almost gentle, and that's what made them so powerful. The salesman hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Then, embarrassed in front of the crowd, he doubled down. "You think I'm scared of you," he said loudly. "You're old. Slow. You don't scare me at all." Steven sighed softly, not in frustration, but in disappointment. "This isn't about fear," he said. "It's about self-control." The salesman stepped closer again, chest puffed out, clearly trying to intimidate him. He poked Steven in the shoulder with his finger. "Do something," he taunted. "Come on. Show everyone who you are." Gasps rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "This is going too far." Steven glanced down at the salesman's finger, then back up at his eyes. "Don't touch me again," he said quietly. The room seemed to freeze. For the first time, the salesman looked uncertain. But pride wouldn't let him stop now, not with all those cameras rolling. He shoved Steven lightly in the chest. That was the moment everyone thought it would explode. But Steven didn't strike back. Instead, he took one slow step back, hand still open, voice calm and clear. "I warned you," he said. "You're choosing this." The salesman laughed nervously. "You warned me," he mocked. "Who do you think you are?" Steven looked around the room once more, at the frightened cashier near the counter, at the customers recording, at the tension he hadn't created but now had to contain. "I'm someone who believes violence should be the last option," he said. But I also believe in responsibility. The salesman rolled his eyes. You're full of it. He raised his voice, speaking to the crowd now. You see this guy? Thinks he's some kind of wise man. No one laughed. That silence unnerved him. You don't even know my name, the salesman continued, turning back to Steven. But I know exactly what you are. Steven's expression didn't change. Then you're mistaken, he replied. The salesman clenched his fists. His breathing grew heavier. He was losing control, and everyone could see it. Steven, on the other hand, looked completely at ease. That's the difference between us, Steven said calmly. I don't need to prove anything. The salesman stepped back half a step, then lunged forward again, clearly trying to provoke a reaction one last time. Hit me, he said. Go on. Hit me. A woman near the display whispered, Someone stop this. But Steven didn't move. He simply said, I won't. That answer confused the salesman more than any punch could have. The crowd waited, breath held, sensing that the situation was hanging by a thread, one wrong move away from chaos. If you were standing there watching this happen, what would you do? Would you step in or stay back? Type your answer in the comments. Steven Seagal remained still, grounded, and calm, a quiet presence in the middle of a storm. And the salesman, blinded by pride and pressure, had no idea that the next moment would change everything he thought he knew about power, strength, and the man standing in front of him. The tension in the store had reached a strange breaking point, not explosive, but heavy, like the air before a storm. Everyone could feel it. The salesman stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched, while Steven Seagal remained calm, unmoving, almost detached from the chaos around him. Then something shifted. A man standing near the back of the store narrowed his eyes at Steven. He had been watching quietly, phone lowered, studying his face instead of the confrontation. Wait a second, he murmured. The woman beside him leaned closer. What? That guy, the man whispered. He looks really familiar. Steven slightly turned his head, not reacting to the comment, but aware that the energy in the room was changing. Another customer, a younger guy near the watches, quickly tapped on his phone. He glanced up, then back down again, his eyes widening. No way, he whispered. The salesman didn't notice. He was still riding the adrenaline of confrontation, convinced he was in control. You hear me? The salesman snapped at Steven. I'm done talking. But the whispers were growing now, spreading quietly through the crowd like a ripple. Isn't that? I think that's. Hold on, let me check. Steven stood silently, hands relaxed, eyes calm. He wasn't looking for recognition. In fact, he seemed almost uncomfortable with the attention shifting toward him. A woman near the counter finally spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. Excuse me, are you Steven Seagal? The question hung in the air. The salesman froze for just a split second, then laughed loudly. Oh, come on, he said. You really think this guy is some celebrity now? Steven didn't answer right away. He glanced around at the crowd, then back at the woman. That's not important, he said quietly. What's important is how we treat each other. That response only deepened the curiosity. The man in the back raised his phone higher. I swear that's him. Same voice. Same face. Someone else chimed in, the action movie guy? The martial arts one. The salesman shook his head, irritation creeping back into his voice. This is ridiculous. You people are buying into his act. Steven calmly took a step away from the counter, giving the salesman space, not retreating, but de-escalating. I don't want this to turn into something worse, Steven said. It doesn't have to. But the salesman's confidence was cracking now. He glanced around and noticed the phones, the whispers, the sudden shift in how people were looking at Steven, not as a nobody, but as someone significant. Who do you think you are? The salesman demanded. Steven looked at him, his expression steady. I'm just a man who came in here to shop, he said. Nothing more. The crowd didn't believe that anymore. A customer near the entrance finally spoke louder, unable to contain himself. Man, I'm pretty sure that's Steven Seagal. The room went still. The salesman's face drained slightly of color. No, he said quickly. No way. Steven sighed softly. Whether you know my name or not shouldn't matter, he said. Respect isn't something you earn by fame. That sentence hit the room harder than any threat. A few people nodded. Someone whispered, "That's definitely him." The salesman took a step back, suddenly unsure. "If you're so important," he said defensively, "why didn't you say so earlier?" Steven met his eyes. "Because respect shouldn't depend on status," he replied. "If you treat me differently because you recognize me now, that's the real problem." The words landed like a mirror held up to the salesman's behavior. The crowd grew bolder. "You were way out of line," someone said. "That slap was unnecessary," another added. The salesman opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since this began, he didn't know what to say. Steven stood there quietly, not enjoying the moment, not feeding off it, simply present. And in that silence, the realization settled in for everyone watching. This situation was never about a celebrity being disrespected. It was about a man who chose patience when he could have chosen power, about dignity in the face of arrogance, and about how quickly judgment can turn into regret. The salesman swallowed hard, realizing that whatever happened next, things would never be the same. Because now the truth was close to being fully revealed. And once it was, there would be no turning back. The store no longer felt like a place of luxury. It felt like a courtroom. Everyone stood still, watching the salesman, whose confidence had begun to crumble under the weight of dozens of eyes. The whispers had stopped. The phones were steady now, recording every second. Whatever happened next was going to be remembered. The salesman cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "All right," he said sharply, forcing a laugh. "Enough of this nonsense. I don't care who you think he is. He assaulted no one. He doesn't belong here." Steven Seagal looked at him, not with anger, but with something far more unsettling, disappointment. "You struck me," Steven said calmly. "In front of witnesses. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a choice." The salesman's jaw tightened. "You pushed me." "I didn't touch you," Steven replied. "And you know that." A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. "That's true. We saw everything. He didn't do anything." The salesman raised his voice. "You people don't know what you're talking about." Steven slowly lifted one hand, not threatening, not aggressive, just enough to signal calm. "This is exactly why I didn't react earlier," he said. "Because anger makes people reckless." The words struck a nerve. "You think you're better than me?" the salesman snapped. Steven paused before answering. "No," he said. "I think you're capable of better than this." For a moment, it looked like the salesman might step back. His shoulders dropped slightly. His breathing slowed. Then pride took over. "You don't get to talk down to me," he said bitterly. "Not you. Not anyone." He stepped forward again, chest puffed, voice rising. "You think because people are filming, I'm scared?" Steven adjusted his stance, subtle, deliberate. His feet shifted just enough to ground him. His hands remained open, relaxed. "I'm asking you to stop," Steven said quietly. "Right now." The salesman scoffed. "Or what?" That question echoed in the store. Steven didn't answer immediately. He looked around, at the customers pressed against the walls, at the cashier trembling behind the counter, at the phones capturing every angle. "I don't want to hurt you," Steven said. "But I will protect myself if you force me to." The salesman laughed again, louder this time, desperate. "Protect yourself," he mocked. "From me." He lunged forward suddenly, shoving Steven hard in the chest. Gasps filled the room. This time, Steven moved. It wasn't fast in the way people expected. It wasn't flashy. It was precise. In one smooth motion, Steven stepped to the side, redirected the salesman's momentum, and gently twisted his arm, not violently, not cruelly. Just enough. The salesman found himself off balance, his own force working against him. In less than a second, he was on the floor, face down, arm pinned comfortably but firmly behind his back. Steven knelt beside him, calm as ever. "I asked you to stop," he said. The room exploded with shock. "Oh my God! Did you see that? He didn't even hit him. Steven released the hold immediately and stepped back, raising both hands so everyone could see. I'm not here to fight, he said clearly. I'm here to end this. The salesman scrambled to his feet, humiliated, stunned, eyes wide with disbelief. How did you? He stammered. Steven didn't answer. The truth was obvious now. This wasn't an ordinary man. This wasn't luck. This was discipline. The crowd buzzed with energy. Some people clapped instinctively, then stopped, unsure if it was appropriate. Others simply stared, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Steven looked directly at the salesman. This could have ended much earlier, he said. You chose escalation. I chose restraint. The salesman said nothing. He couldn't. Because in that moment, everyone understood something powerful. Strength isn't about domination. It's about control. And Steven Seagal had just shown the entire room what true control looked like. As footsteps echoed from the back of the store, security finally rushing in, one thing was certain. The final truth was about to be revealed. And the consequences were unavoidable. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the back of the store. 2 security guards rushed in first, followed closely by the store manager, a sharply dressed man whose confident stride slowed the moment he saw the crowd, the phones raised in the air, and the salesman standing pale and shaken near the counter. What's going on here? The manager demanded. No one answered immediately. Instead, dozens of phones subtly shifted direction, pointing toward Steven Seagal. The manager followed their gaze. His eyes landed on Steven's face. And then, he froze. For a brief moment, the manager just stared, as if his mind was trying to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. His expression changed instantly. Surprise, recognition, and then panic. Oh my! He stopped himself, swallowing hard. Sir? Steven Seagal. A collective gasp swept through the store. The salesman's head snapped toward the manager. What? He said, his voice cracking. What did you say? The manager straightened his posture immediately. Everyone, please calm down, he said, though his voice lacked authority now. His attention was fixed entirely on Steven. Mr. Seagal, I'm incredibly sorry for what's happened here. The salesman's face drained of all color. Steven Seagal, he whispered. Steven nodded slightly, not proudly, not defensively, just acknowledging the truth that no longer needed to be hidden. Yes, he said calmly. But that shouldn't change how this is handled. The salesman staggered back a step, his mouth opening and closing without sound. I didn't know, he stammered. I swear, I had no idea. Steven looked at him steadily. That's exactly the point. The crowd buzzed louder now. I knew it. That's him. No wonder he stayed so calm. Security moved in closer, unsure who to restrain, until the manager raised a hand. No, the manager said firmly. He's not the problem. He turned sharply toward the salesman. Step aside. Now. The salesman obeyed without a word. The manager faced Steven again, visibly shaken. Mr. Seagal, on behalf of this store, I sincerely apologize. This behavior does not represent our values. We will deal with this immediately. Steven glanced at the phones, then back at the manager. I don't want special treatment, he said. I want equal treatment. The words hit hard. The manager nodded quickly. Of course. Of course. Security escorted the salesman a few steps away. He looked small now, stripped of arrogance, stripped of authority. Just a man confronting the consequences of his choices. A customer spoke up from the crowd. He slapped him. We all saw it. Yes, another added. And he kept provoking him. The manager's jaw tightened. There will be an internal investigation, he said. Effective immediately, you are suspended. The salesman's shoulders slumped. Steven stepped forward slightly. That's enough, he said. Everyone turned toward him. I didn't come here to ruin anyone's life, Steven continued. I came here to make a point. The manager looked confused. Sir. Steven gestured lightly toward the salesman. If you punish him only because you now know who I am, he said, then nothing has been learned. Silence followed. I was treated with disrespect because I was judged by appearance, Steven continued. That happens to people every day who don't have a famous name to protect them. The crowd listened intently now. No one was filming for drama anymore. They were recording a message. Steven looked directly at the salesman. You don't need to fear me, he said. But you should reflect on how quickly power can disappear. The salesman nodded slowly, eyes lowered. I'm sorry, he said quietly. This time, it sounded real. Steven accepted the apology with a simple nod. I hope you mean that, he said. Do you believe respect should depend on fame or status? Type equality if you believe everyone deserves the same respect. The manager cleared his throat. Mr. Seagal, please allow us to make this right. Steven shook his head gently. Make it right by changing how you treat the next person who walks through those doors. The security guards relaxed. The tension in the store finally began to fade. Customers slowly lowered their phones, some still shaking their heads in disbelief. One man whispered, That's real strength. Steven picked up his sunglasses from the counter and placed them back on. As he turned toward the exit, the crowd instinctively parted to give him space, not out of fear, but respect. Behind him, the salesman stood silently, watching the moment pass, knowing he had just learned a lesson he would never forget. And outside the store, unseen but inevitable, the videos were already spreading online. Because this wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was about to become a story the world would talk about. A story about restraint, humility, and the true meaning of power. By the time Steven Seagal stepped out onto the sidewalk, the world had already begun to change around him, even if he couldn't see it yet. Inside the store, people were still standing in stunned silence. Outside, traffic moved as usual, unaware that a moment of quiet power had just unfolded behind glass walls. Steven paused for a second, letting the cool air settle his thoughts, then walked away without looking back. But the story didn't end there. Within hours, short clips from the incident began appearing online. First on social media stories. Then full videos. Then headlines. Salesman attacks Steven Seagal, instantly regrets it. Steven Seagal shows incredible restraint after being slapped in public. Real strength is self-control. Viral video sparks global debate. Millions watched. Not because Steven was famous, but because of how he behaved. Comment sections exploded with reactions. I expected violence, but this was way more powerful. He could have destroyed him, but chose discipline. This is what real confidence looks like. People from all over the world weighed in, sharing stories of being judged, disrespected, or underestimated simply because of how they looked. The video had struck a nerve, not with shock alone, but with meaning. News outlets reached out for interviews. Reporters wanted statements. Opinions. Drama. Steven declined most of them. When he finally spoke, it was brief and simple. I didn't handle the situation because I'm famous, he said. I handled it because I'm human. That single sentence spread almost as fast as the video itself. The store released an official apology the next day, promising new training focused on respect, de-escalation, and equality. The salesman was formally dismissed after an internal review. There were no lawsuits. No public shaming campaigns led by Steven. He never mentioned the man's name. Instead, Steven posted a short message on his personal page. True power isn't proven by dominance. It's proven by restraint. Treat everyone with dignity, especially when you think they don't matter. The response was overwhelming. Martial artists praised his control. Parents shared the video with their children. Even law enforcement and conflict resolution experts commented on how calmly the situation had been handled. One comment stood out, liked hundreds of thousands of times. This wasn't an action movie. This was a masterclass. Days later, a talk show host asked Steven one final question during a rare appearance. Why didn't you use your fame right away to stop it? Steven smiled faintly. Because the lesson would have been lost, he said. Respect given only to the famous isn't respect. It's fear. The audience went silent, then erupted in applause. Somewhere else in the city, the former salesman sat alone, replaying the moment over and over in his head. Not the fall. Not the humiliation. But the calm. The way Steven never raised his voice. The way he never insulted him. The way he offered him a chance to stop, more than once. It was a lesson that stayed. And for the millions who watched, it stayed too. Because what shocked everyone wasn't the slap. And it wasn't the takedown. It was the restraint. It was the reminder that strength doesn't always look loud. That power doesn't need to announce itself. And that sometimes, the strongest thing a person can do is choose not to fight. If you believe respect should never depend on appearance, fame, or status, type respect in the comments. And subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us what real strength truly means.